Namaste.
So we apologize for being late tonight. So welcome to our community satsang. And this is live all over the world. Awesome. Welcome. Thank you. All right. So I'm turning this over to Satri.
So I thought I would speak once again about the opportunity of Washoe Valley, of the Washoe Valley Center. Just sort of in the recognition of how gritty and tire meets the road, and how we actually have to come to personal responsibility with our own mortality and with and the way we live and the patterns of behaviors that we've organized our life here in a way that you're in almost constant remembrance of what is the purpose of life. And we do this work, goes out to so many people. We're doing a board meeting tomorrow, right? And we're pulling together all these statistics and the number of programs and the number of people. And I realize that very few realize that this is the core arena where the working out of what it takes to make something real in your life is done with each of you who are part of the community, and for those who can come on a regular basis or for substantial periods of time, as this deepening and integrating into a lived pattern with other people who are doing it also. And, it's been 9 years. And in this process, we've been able to keep seeking to find out what's missing. Satchmaya, myself, and the board, and those who have been shaping the direction of this work, have been deeply committed in the evolution of this possibility and to keep refining what that might look like, and trying to come out of just my own personal story, which was an absolute, complete, full tilt boogie, going for it, to something that could be more integrated. That's something that could be more reflective of the realization that's come now that the Gita is really speaking of this no separation, that spirit and matter need to work out the differences between them, like a bad relationship, so that this possibility for matter can be a fulfillment for spirit as well as for matter.
I'd like to speak.
Yeah.
I want to talk about what it has been like for me over here with all of you, and the faces have changed over the years, but it's like a grand experiment. I think everything is always, life is a grand experiment. You go out there, you're given what you're given, and then you just proceed out. And if you've got a lot of content, well, you got to deal with a lot of content. And if you don't have a lot of content, then you're in a different space. Washoe Valley Center started in Chipmunk. Not everybody knows that. I came home from being in India for 3 months, and I had all these people living in my house and in trailers, and it was like, oh my God.
That's a problem.
Yeah, he didn't see it as a problem. Of course not. So that's kind of how this whole thing started. People coming and living in Chipmunk, and we had, at that point, the dome was built. So that was the meditation hall. For the 9 or 12 of us that would come, like Gail would come from down the street and somebody else would come from across the valley or from Reno. It was very organic. There wasn't a plan. There wasn't this like grand vision that, oh my God, we're going to have all these houses here and we're going to be in Europe and in India. That didn't exist.
We did have an intent back then.
Yes, we did have an intent.
We didn't have a plan.
Right. So what we've done is, with all of you who are here, or those of you who are out there, on Crowdcast or other places, is we just went out and did it. And if it worked, great. If it didn't, then you went back and said, okay, this didn't work, so then we need to shift it. It wasn't that it was anybody's fault or there was any blame in that. It's simply that this is the process of life. You move forward, the universe either makes it a smooth direction and you're like, okay, this must be the right way to go. Or you bang up against something and you're like, okay, well, maybe I need to go to the right or the left. So it's an ongoing, continuous process. And it will always be an ongoing, continuous process, that nothing is going to be static. It is a dynamic process that as Satri and I change, all of you change, different people come, it just continues. And it's like this amazing thing.
It's a co-creation.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's not like we sat up in a room one day and went, okay, we need to do this. Now we do that. We do go into the back with the whiteboard and write down ideas, but then we take them out to you guys. And, so Saraswati ended up with a facilitator's training program, and other people have ended up with individual retreat programs, and just all kinds of things have kind of morphed out of that. So that's the fun part too, is that as people are here and coming forward and participating, that it's been not just about Satri and I, it is about all of you at all times.
So it's this unfolding of manifests, bringing something into existence and taking the persistent action with no guarantee of any outcome, because it's true, because it's right, because it's a reflection of my whole being or our whole being about how can this serve? How can we bring this into life? And it first, of course, started outward, but eventually it led to our relationship. It has eventually led to, what are the limiters? Well, we're the limiters. We're in the way of what can still happen. And so then there's been this whole process of meeting those structures that we didn't even, that were the remnants or the embedded paradigms or structures inherited that were getting in the way, that were interfering or tripping up the unfolding of that intention. So it's no different than it is for each of you. And I do believe that the momentum over these 9 years has now created a different possibility in the community. And the alignment that has occurred now is where there is not just co-creators, but fellow travelers in the unfolding of what this may be. And it's been also, the languaging has come forward consistently, where really essentially, for me, it's been a journey of the Gita. It's been the battlefield. It's been the coming and meeting the non-listening and the hopelessness and the resistance and the rebellion and the continuous defeat that was along the way, and to have something moving it forward always. And in the process, the nature of what it is that's the intent gets more and more revealed. The nature of what is needed becomes clearer, and the nature of the scope expands. This is the nature of anything, the manifestation. It starts in this little, like you're the chief of the little pond you built for yourself, right? And you're the guy in charge or girl in charge. It's your house, your job, your family, your mother, your father, your cousins, your money, and whatever it is. That's your little pond. You're the head tadpole of your little pond. When you start setting an intent, when you start waking up and becoming conscious that you are something other than what you thought you were, when you begin this process of awakening, you also begin to recognize the difference you make, the difference you've been making, and then the difference you make, the difference you've been making that has been the reflection of your unmet structures, a reflection of your resistance, your dissatisfaction, that you surrounded yourself with the people that are the reflection of that pattern within yourself. And in the process of unveiling those within yourself, you begin to notice they disappear outside of you. And the arena, as you go into life, begins to change proportional to your ability to perceive and to respond to that from within your own personal responsibility. And the art of it was daily, regular action. You know, we didn't travel away from Washoe as much back then as we did. Washoe was like the full-time place with periodic visits here and there. Seattle, Portland, Boulder. But this was home base. And, you know, it didn't have the kind of energy. It didn't have the kind of camaraderie. There were strugglings and competitions, and all of which had to be met from within both of us in order for that to move, so that no longer was necessary for the unfolding of the opportunity. So I'm sharing this because it's a model of what you would do, what you need to do, what you are doing, in fact, as you try to align your life to that higher possibility of what you are and to bring it into your lived life.
It's a little bit off, but not quite. So, you know, when Satri had his awakening in 1998, it took about 3 months for the whole thing to kind of unfold. And then at one point, he simply moved out of the house into the little RV. It's not there, it's another one. But he just moved out. And then Bhagavan showed up and he moved over there to Silver City. So the idea of Washoe Valley came together not as a community, not as a spiritual community, but more based on how Satri came to this, the rigor that he applied to this awakening that he had in his 6 years in India, where there was a regular schedule and there wasn't anything outside. There was no coffee shops. I mean, seriously, all this. I was there twice to see how he lived in India. So when we think about Washoe Valley at the very beginning, that was the model. It's how Satri came to his full realization of himself. It was through a constant structured rigor. There was nothing that we have here. There wasn't groups coming together, mentors, none of that. No, I mean, the Bhagavan would sit and talk about a verse of the Gita for 2 or 3 hours. Seriously, I mean, and you just sit there. Or, you know, regular meditations that if you didn't show up on time, the door was locked. You know, a lot of things that, because that's what worked for him. That's what brought him, that rigor brought him to where he is. Now, he woke to that. So what he did was simply put the building blocks in place and the structure and went out there. And I think the biggest thing, the biggest learning lesson for both of us was not everybody comes with that rigor. It's just, you know, it's not possible. There's a certain personality that brings that rigor. And it's not necessary either. So out of that recognition, I think at some point Satri realized, oh, these people are coming, but they're not coming in the same spirit that I came to Bhagavan. They're coming for whatever reason. And there's endless reasons to come to a spiritual teacher. So that was like the very first big recognition that there's a certain, you know, that the structure that was in a way being imposed that just had to be more flexible. And then more people can come and stay for longer periods of time. And in that place, everything has shifted and continues to shift.
And I believe it's also true that the collective consciousness has shifted, and that there is this way of bringing what Satchamayu is calling a rigor in such a way that it becomes a frame by which we can integrate the parts of our lives that are still undeveloped, simultaneously using that as an unfolding of that innate spiritual possibility as we release ourselves from those structures that we've unwittingly taken on, believed in, habituated ourselves to. And I recognize that what worked and what doesn't work about it. And one thing that I am very clear about is that I bring ordeal. Not a deal, ordeal. I bring the opportunity for you to meet your ordeal, the meaning of which allows you to transmute that into a great deal. as Donald Trump would say. A much improved version, a super fantastic kind of version of what you were before. So what is the nature of ordeal? It is a matter of this process of putting you into a place where there's no way out for periods of time, where you commit and you aligned yourself. And this is what those who've been in the 9 days, especially, but the 6 days and other programs have been, is to be a frame in which you start meeting your ego, where you start bumping up against the dissatisfaction structures, where you start finding the negativity, where you discover what it is that's been hidden in such an accelerated way and in such a energetic field that it actually starts dissolving as you go through the process. Maybe it won't go away completely, but it'll reduce its convincing grip on your unexamined identity. And in the process, you'll pop out and there will be this new way of being. Now, usually lasts for 3 to 7 days after the ordeal, where you feel really good. And, you sign up for the next retreat and then you start having second thoughts. What am I thinking of? That was horrible. I don't want to have to do. Once you drift back into your more ordinary consciousness, it wasn't all so wonderful. It wasn't all so great. And then the ego keeps track of those, and is the cost benefit ratio in my advantage here. So it's this process by which we learn to tolerate ordeals, learn to look for the opportunity of creating an ordeal where that which is hidden in you otherwise would be revealed. So you could say, in one extent, that Washoe Valley is an ongoing ordeal. And anybody who's been able to stick with this long enough is going to be able to have a more true and direct relationship with themselves than in any other possible situation. They may not be able to break through it because some of the things that create ordeals are so embedded or so linked up to your ancestral karma or so linked up to the collective karma that it isn't even meant to be moved, just recognized and in time learned to work with. But this is the field where you're in a continuous process. Of course, you're going to get cranky. Of course, you're going to get dissatisfied. Of course, you're going to have doubts. Of course, that would be very reasonable and very fair. And for most people, knowing there's an end date is very helpful, right? You take away the end date and you have what I am, that it's all just ordeal. There's a word I know, there's something unreal. Ordeal and unreal. So maybe a poet in me is trying to sprout on the scene. But there is something new, something more real that comes out of the ordeal that brings you into existence in a way you never knew you could be or you could tolerate, or that it didn't need the same number of props and structures and compensating strategies. It could just hold whatever the next ordeal might be. And the more you come out of the pond, the bigger the opportunity for meeting the next ordeal.
I'd like to speak to that. Yeah. So my ordeal started, was it January 4th, 1998, right, when he had his awakening. I didn't recognize exactly what that was going to be, but it was like, there's you see pictures of a mushroom cloud from an atomic explosion, and then it takes a while, and then boom, the energy hits.
Destroys everything.
And destroys everything. And I would say that that's exactly what my experience was. It took a few months to realize what the impact of that awakening was going to be on me. And then Satri was gone for 6 years. So I had a good 6 years living by myself and really coming to my own authority in the material world. And that was like invaluable. And then he came back, and then this whole process of developing Washoe started.
In our collaboration.
And but we weren't in collaboration at that point. But I think about how intense the ordeals were at that time. Like for 3 years, I think I was in a continual state of dejection, and then one day I woke up and it was gone. I was like, oh my God, I could feel there was like no like gut clench, it was like gone. And I was like, oh my God. And then of course the next ordeal shows up a little bit, so you can never like take a big breath because something else is, right there ready to come along. And then when we started the Washoe program, there was a lot of opportunities, which they keep on coming. But I also noticed that as I have gone into this, and like some of us have lived together in many different situations. So, and a lot has happened in the community in the last few years. Out of all of that, there is this spaciousness that has come to me by meeting these ordeals. Not everything is done yet. There will always be something, and Satri and I have an agreement about that, to just hold, Satchimai, just hold. Don't kick the garbage can, just hold, but so many things I've just let go of. And there's this sense of freedom and possibility in that, and not thinking it, just one day noticing that there's a space that wasn't there.
You're living from a different place.
Yeah, there's a relaxation, a breath that didn't exist, that now exists. And so now that can, so what's, with what's happening, it's an ongoing process that really did start in India, 3 or 4 years ago, that now continues and is becoming stronger. And I don't even know where I'm going with this, just to basically say, if you can just make it through the ordeals, there is light at the other end of the tunnel.
Actually,
and it does get better.
What gets better isn't the ordeals.
No.
What gets better is your relationship with them. Yeah. What changes is your fundamental part of you that creates ordeals.
Well, and I've noticed that, the ego begins to let go. It actually does, and to go in collaboration with the being. And then when that happens, then the connection with everything becomes more and more present, and which then again allows that to continue to go on. So it's just like, it's just I don't want to say feeding. What's the word I want? Tonya, you're always really good at explaining these things, but it just makes it stronger so that
nurtures.
It nurtures.
Yeah.
Whatever.
So it actually becomes, the ordeal becomes the food.
Yeah.
So it becomes another opportunity to meet that which hasn't been met up until now, that can then be integrated when it's met sufficiently. And what you get developed is two things: a resilience, a flexibility, a willingness, and a strength, a presence, a spaciousness that can allow whatever needs to arise without the impatience or the demands of, or the resistances or the denials of the old human strategies. So it's an unfolding of the possibility of really what it comes down to is not so much apparently the matter or the circumstances or the people or the effectiveness, but the quality of you as the experiencer or the perceiver. That the opportunity of organizing something as large as we've organized is that it's become a means by which we can meet levels of ordeals we would have never imagined when we were the two little tadpoles of our pond in Washoe Valley. It is the ability to start stepping into what it is that the collective consciousness has not been able to include, to accommodate, to understand, to move into relationship with, and thereby reveal the inherent possibility and potentiality for greater truth, greater wisdom, greater strength, greater resilience, greater capacity. That lies inherent in everything that for us is still the ordeal. It's where all our trapped energy is. It's where all our trapped wisdom is. It's where all our trapped aliveness is locked up into that which we experience as the problem or the restraint or that, and this happens to a certain extent through nature, through the evolution of matter and through the evolution of a human being from the first life as a human being through the 100,000 lives, is that it's a slow evolving, wearing down of the mountain of error that we inherit when we take a birth as a human being. But this is a complete different paradigm. It doesn't need to take down the mountain. The mountain instead becomes the resource instead of the obstacle. It becomes that in which we mine the mountain. We mine it, that we own it, as we mine the mountain of the collective error that we all still carry as something to avoid, to not have to experience, to protect ourselves from. So I just want to acknowledge those who are here, who are part of the long-term residential programs, and those who have been here in the past, who have been able to stay with us as long as they could. It was much harder back then. The depths and the density of the ordeals was much greater for those who came for longer periods of time in the past.
Well, and for early days, because it was different. You know, we didn't have the structure we have now. Has made a big difference, I think.
And part of this is the willingness to accommodate the egoic portion of the personality sufficiently so that it can collaborate with the unfolding of the being that's occurring. So that means that there has to be this balancing between the ordeal and relief from the ordeal. This easing by having relationship in the community, by having support, by having other means by which the human in you can still work out what's left. Some people, you have to leave. You have to go off. You got to return to your previous circumstances or reach out to whatever is next for a period of time, or then that's it. Then New Dharma, the Washoe Valley, has served a function in the unfolding of that possibility with you.
You know, something else I like. So there's no school on how to be a guru. There's no classes you can take unless you come from a lineage. And in this particular case, you know, there was Bhagavan, but Bhagavan's in India. And this is a very different environment. So for us to come forward to do this work is, you know, we come from our personality, we came from our content, we came from our experience, from our own wisdom. And part of it is just the, you know, be kind of like you said, little tadpoles in the pond, but really kind of innocent little tadpoles. I never was with a teacher. I never was with a community. I have absolutely no idea, even today, what that's like for somebody who's come from that kind of a situation and how people look at the figures that sit up here, the forms that sit in these chairs, as the archetype or the mother, the father, or whatever, and what that means to people individually and as a community. And I think that's a conversation we've never really had. And this is probably, I don't know if this is the best, I don't know. I've just opened it up because I thought, wow, I just never had that opportunity. I don't know what that's like to be in your shoes and to be with us. I don't know.
Having not had, she's been drug along.
Yeah, I went kicking and screaming. Believe me.
Long troughs as she was being drugged.
Yeah, those of you who
that
live
at
Chipmunk,
troughs.
You all know the straw. Yeah, there's big holes and pieces. Yeah.
Okay, so, you know, and it's a continuous unfolding, right? Of what this might look like and what you're seeing with Satyamai now. She's chuckling uncontrollably.
Yes, it's really funny.
It's just, you know, because there's something that's
now
unfolding in her. That's a recognition of the delight of what it is all about, ultimately, is coming into a more true relationship with existence by coming out of our littleness into something much larger, by committing to something that's outside of the boundary of what we're comfortable with, committing to something that's beyond. And that's what makes something an ordeal, is a commitment. It's not just that there's a 9-day or 6-day. You can spend most of the time in a 6 or a 9-day thinking about when it's over or strategies for getting by.
Oh, yeah.
rather than actually meeting the ordeal. So, it's not the ordeal itself. It's that in us that does not know how to be in a relationship to what's arising for you in that situation.
Well, it's
in that
not
period
even
of time.
it's not even knowing that you're going to be in that situation. I think Bhagavan said to Satri early days, well, if she makes it through the process, then she'll manifest your mission, right? So I've just said yes to everything. That's the only way I could. Satri's like, go move to Reno. Yes. Come sit up here. Yes. Go do that. Yes. What else is there to say? There was not a plan. There was not even a desire. There was no desire. I don't mind the manifestation part because I can work behind the scenes and I don't have to deal with my personality and your personalities. We can all have this little separation, but no, not when I sit up here. There is no separation. It's very interesting. And I've learned a lot about myself.
And so the nature of this for Satchmai is so interesting to watch because, in fact, there was an intent. There was a recognition of a purpose, of something purposeful with my awakening. It wasn't that Bhagavan said, well, if you could make it. That
he did say that.
He did say that. But he also initiated us together. The principle is he opened a possibility and gave a new way of holding what was happening for herself while I was gone. If that wouldn't have been there if that had not happened. And he gave her responsibilities. She had responsibilities in helping organizing a nonprofit for my teacher here in the United States. And she was active in the community here and
spent a lot of time up in Silver City for those of you who've done that. Yeah, lived up there for a period of time to manage that ashram. So was very involved at that level, but
right.
Which I'm really comfortable at that level, but it's like, this level is just a whole different thing.
You're also more conscious.
Yeah, that's probably that has a lot to do with it.
More it's as we come into this quality of being, we also come into responsibility of the impact we make on life, negatively or positively. We become aware of how our choices, which seem so personal, just seems like us, like we're still imagining we're living in a little pond, but it's actually having repercussions that are going to be out there, and they're going to be some nasty ones that you couldn't see inward are now showing up outward, so you can see it through the reflection.
And actually, I mean, what we're speaking about here is all of you too. Because each one of us, I mean, we're all the same. We're all just in a body, but we're all dealing with content, with archetypes, with a perceived idea of how we want things to be or how people should act around us or how the expectations of how it should be to live in a spiritual community, and it's like I have expectations about how I think you guys should be, so less so, but it's taken years. And it's really interesting as I see new faces that come into the room and realizing that all of you at some point are in the flow of this, but when you bring new people in, and then how do they enter into this flow and how interesting that is and what expectations they bring into the room. So.
Very good. This is part of this is then those who have been here for a while actually have a greater mattering for those new people who come through.
Yeah.
And that being able to be responsible for what you talk about is the more conscious you are, the more you can be here for them, not just use them for your own purposes. So this whole learning to be shifting the attention of what it is that I want or what I feel is natural and familiar for me, and what is it that they want, is part of us getting out of the box. And I did want to put a little correction here in my languaging. When I speak of ordeal, life is full of ordeals. But the nature of the ordeals that come up in the course of life that we have to meet, if we like it or not, the death of someone, a very difficult condition where there's a lot of pain, and all these are not opportunities until you awake. They're not transmuting experiences, not in themselves. There has to be something in you that when these naturally arising ordeals arise, that can learn the lesson that's inherent in that ordeal, or else you simply, the ordeal rises up and then quiets until another time where it can rise up once again. But in this situation, a conscious ordeal is like preventative medicine, where you put yourself into the most miserable situation you can imagine, where nature would have to work really hard to create that for you. And you prepare yourself so that when the ordeals do come, such like your death, you're able to be present in a way that wouldn't have been possible if you hadn't chosen to consciously challenge yourself, consciously work to find what is still in the way. Of course, we're not going to be able to find what's in the way until we have sufficient awakening. So the ordeal will come up and we will be the victims of the ordeal. But if you have sufficient awakening, and if you have a context, and you've had some training and experience with meeting ordeals consciously, purposely, either because of your work or because of your education or because of the childhood you survived or your own psychological work or any of it, then you will be able to be in relationship with that ordeal when it comes and begin to learn from that. How quickly we learn the lesson, how quickly we're able to integrate it and change the actions that were coming from the place that created these naturally arising ordeals. The more we move out of the boundaries, the mountain ranges of our ancestral karma and of our inherited patterns into this broader scope of the world and existence. So this is gritty, this is real, doing this not for transcendence, but to bring alive the content, the matter that has defined us, is the fundamental different message of the Buddha Gita. It's basically what is known as the tantric path, that it's through life that spirit can manifest. And it's through spirit that life can wake up to its full possibility. This is the Gita. This is the work. So no matter how ordinary it seems, how stuck you feel, how familiar your issues are, how habituated you are, how restless you are, how dissatisfied you are, it's all occurring within a context to take you into a place where you are in a truer and more fulfilled relationship with existence. And what happens then is the ego in you is swallowed up into the principle from which ego arose. It is an I amness. It is a knowing of its own existence. It is a purposeful quality of being that is beyond whatever your ordinary tadpole consciousness knew itself to be. And in that transition, the tadpole is in awe. Where did that big frog come from? It's this unfolding of a possibility for being we can't imagine until we become it and begin to sample what it tastes, what it feels, what it experiences like, what it knows.
So I'd like to, here you find yourself again in another transition in Washoe Valley. And that's just part of what we do. Change is constant, and that's what happens here. And Europe is growing, and even India has doubled from last year. So, we're like
120 people.
But that's two places. So and we don't know how that's going to be. There'll be 60 people in Tiru and 60 in Rishikesh. And we put 3 air conditioners in the villa in the meditation hall for those of you who are worried about that.
To accommodate the egos. Yes. Make it a little easier.
And so that was a donation to us too. So that was really cool. But, so it's like, we're experiencing the transition, and we see it come into the community, and, to let everyone know that everyone who is here, the role, everything you do matters. It really matters, because it doesn't matter. It matters not just for yourself, but it matters for everybody who's coming. after, or who'll come for a guest or for a period of time. But our commitment is why we brought Mariana Kaplan to work with us, or why some of the other choices that we have made to strengthen each of you individually to the extent that we can. And we're not personally able to do that, to bring people in who can do that. That commitment to that, the work that everybody has chosen to come here to learn to do, or to open up the capacity to do. I'm not always sure my languaging is correct, but, and we know, and really the truth being, we'll probably be in Washoe for about 5 or 6 months, or even less, actually, April to August. And then we go to Europe again, come back and go to India again. So now there's a cycle. So even those of you who are in Washoe when we're not here, you hold a sacred space. It's not done lightly. Satri doesn't ask people to hold that space just because. He asks people to hold that space because it's like a critical part of this whole process. So we may not be here, but you're holding that space. It took us years to have people come up to be able to even hold that space. We would leave people here and we would go to India, we'd come back, and it would be interesting. I was going to say something else, but I won't. Anyway.
It's kind of like you go on a long vacation and you leave the dogs
and the
alone in the house, and you
water.
just open up 3 dog food bags and come back home. And then that's what it looks like.
Yeah. So, those of you
shit everywhere, dog food everywhere, piss everywhere, things torn up, things you got to throw away.
Yeah. Well, you learn from every experience.
So now we have somebody to feed the dogs.
Yeah. We have a number of people who can very adequately feed the dog and the cat. Thank you, Ellie. So, it really, things have changed so much. And it's in this, it's really interesting because as I'm talking about it, I'm actually experiencing it in my body. The transition has happened. The feeling of when you left, that feeling of just being bereft of, oh my God, my best friend is gone. And now looking out and seeing everybody here and the maturity and the commitment and just that groundedness and
the resolve.
And it's because of this work here that we're able to go out and do the work that we're doing in India and in Europe. So,
and this is the invitation of Washoe Valley, is that those who we're meeting, who are in other locations, to be able to come here for extended period and then meet what the opportunity is, engage in it, deepen into it sufficiently so you can bring something of this back into your life.
Well, also the recognition that we've learned that, there will always be a core group of people who hold the houses, who are here leading the groups and whatever. And then people who come and go for 1, 2, or 3 months, maybe once or, well, like both Kaisha and Jan have been here, 2 times this year or 3, coming and going, and how important that is to take this and go back home and see where you are. Where's the integration? What's really happened? It's not until you leave that you really get the impact of this.
It's good. So we're a little bit on this path because we're having kind of like a tire meet the road meeting with Mariana Chaplin over the next 2 days. And it is so this learning to interface a complete different paradigm and structure. She's worked with many different spiritual teachers and spiritual groups with what we're doing in a way that it's empowering, that it can become another means of keeping true to what our purpose is and to stay in remembrance of the challenges and the structures within yourself that could still get in the way of being able to serve this really magnificent thing we are bringing into existence. And so I just wanted to speak to this because I am recognizing that there are many interim stages in the spiritual path. I've spoken about this with the 5 stages. And then on the talk on Tuesday, I believe that was Tuesday, where I talked about the 3 types of authority and the nature of what is the condition, what is the quality of that true authority is ultimately experienced as a current of Satchitananda, that it isn't a thing, it is a person, it is a lived principle which is living us. And this ability to move aligned with that current is really, if we can attune to that, when we can experience that, becomes the most effective way to give over what it is we thought we were to that which we truly are. And some of you are very ready. Some of you, it's not going to be much for the Supreme Being to become a reality for you. And some, it's going to take more and more time. But ultimately, we are expressions of that one being of which the other beings are subsidiaries to, our individual being and our perishable ego being, human being. So it's this discovery of some very fundamental truths about the nature of what we are in existence as a process, not like something you watch on the screen or read in a philosophical treatise or in a spiritual text or be charmed by the poetry that comes out of such a state, but rather something that becomes real and lived and then normal. I should share what normal is like for me. I should look to see if I can find the language, because I'm going to have to reference it to something that's no longer there. So I'm going to have to find a way of languaging what this normal is and what that possibility is for you. Because in some ways, your normal human, the same normal that's there when you're your ordinary self, that normal is there when you're the Supreme Being. But it's qualitatively and quantitatively so different. Yet it's just your new normal. You know, the whole thing of cut wood, carry water, right? It's just become so simple. And this simplicity and this finding this place of simplicity and silence and stillness without an agenda, without an investment, without a need, without a dissatisfaction or an anguish or a pattern or structure, to just be in that pure state of simplicity and silence and stillness, to keep strengthening that capacity to be felt within us until the current starts flowing, or simultaneously the current starts flowing, because we become the emptiness in which the current can enter into existence through us. And we're the evidence that the Supreme Being is beginning to enter us every time we can feel within ourselves that bliss, that energy, that movement, that fulfillment that comes. That's a product of that movement. All right. So I evoke the Supreme Being and I can't talk.
Should we let others talk?
Okay. Yeah.
Let's do that.
Let's let other Supreme Beings who can still talk. That'll be very interesting. I want to hear that. I have a question. Okay.
Okay.
So first of all, I just want to say that we have people from Canada, Mexico, India, Australia, Austria, the Netherlands.
Wow.
Pretty cool. And this is a question from David and Trish. David
in Healdsburg.
Yeah, in Healdsburg. And David writes, even though I haven't been to Washoe, I still feel the salt working with me remotely, but I feel I need some sort of confirmation. Otherwise, it's just guesswork as to what I'm going through.
If you're feeling that, whatever you're able to feel that you're labeling as thought is some reflection of the thought itself. It is because that's all there is. There isn't anything else, but in the manifestation of the thought is all that there is. So obviously, it's going to be whatever it is that you're experiencing. So you can have faith in that. And the only thing that I can say is this, David,
Yeah.
and I know David,
Yeah.
is that there is a way to bring that more deeply into our personality and into our structures that require you to come out of the environment and the relationships that you've created for yourself for periods of time, so that that force can become more dominant and start beginning to accelerate a transformation. And then you will be able to deepen into what this is coming, and ultimately to know that that is what it is without needing a Satri to validate it or not. The principle ultimately is for you to know without needing anybody else to know. And that's where you want to get to. So whatever's in the way that still doubts, still questions, still gets overtaken, still loses itself, this is what you're working with. And therefore, the way to do it is to create a committed action that puts you into a process that you would not normally choose to put yourself into. So David's been with me for some time, and I do know he has a lot of life that he enjoys. And what happens with the sat that comes to him is it gets spent on the activities that he has been habituated to, which then give them more meaning and value than they would have had if you hadn't had the sat come into. And therefore, there's less impulse to actually go and find another avenue by which you can deepen your relationship with the sat rather than spend what comes. Because if it comes and you give it away and comes and give it away, it can't fulfill its purpose. And unlike Lakshmi, sat doesn't withdraw once it opens up. It'll stay there. And you can either collaborate with it or not collaborate with it. But if you don't collaborate with it, it will definitely create ordeals for you that you wouldn't choose to create for yourself. So once you open up to the sat, you may not be motivated to go further in the spiritual path, but the sat will be motivated to manifest as you. So things will start happening, and it might be confusing. You might get caught into places where your ego is not able to collaborate with the unfolding of the opportunity that be showing up. And then you could get sidetracked for years and years. You might even lose the opportunity of a life. So part of it has to do with the appreciation of the opportunity. Not just, it's wonderful that you can feel the force. It's wonderful that you can experience the current. But it also comes with a responsibility. It comes with a willingness to give ourselves over, not just for our own enlightenment, not just for our own enjoyment, not just for the enhancement of the life we've lived up to now, but to be of use, to be of greater service. And perhaps we can even imagine in the way we've been able to be of service up to now. That's why people who have been teachers for years get pulled to this path, because they recognize there's something more than what I've been doing so far, and therefore they're willing to stop their teaching so that what's next can start unfolding. And that is my recommendation. This is the graduate school. This is the place I truly feel and believe and see and observe where you could actually come into that completion that in your very being know is there. For some of you, this life was for me. Could be for quite a few of you.
I can make a suggestion. So if you can't make it to Washoe Valley for extended periods of time, to try to do a Satri program, even if it's for a sat weekend. For next weekend, we have the sat weekend up in Galilee. So it gives you at least a good full day of silence through 3 sittings of 2 hours each. And it's also our last program. But it's something like that at least brings in the remembrance, gives the opportunity for the sat to come in and to have that recognition reinforced. So
we live in a virtual world. Everything we know in the world is on the computer. It's on the TV screen. It's something we listen to. We actually end up satisfied with a remote version of the sat force because we live in a remote version of life itself. So it's not until you actually take yourself out of the remoteness, out of the virtual reality, and put yourself into the situation, that you actually discover what it really means. And in that place, you can be empowered. In that place, you can start discovering that true authority that arises from that principle that you're feeling as a current within yourself. It's helpful. I know there are people who are very attuned psychically, sensitive, subtle, and they can experience my force wherever they are in the world quite distinctly because they're subtletized. They've opened themselves up. But part of the reason they're subtle is because their body is not subtle. They haven't been able to bring it more fully into their embodied. If they did, the thought force would that they would not have the same access, or they would be thrown into a tremendous turbulence as their body tries to catch up rapidly to the quality of the consciousness they're capable of. So there's so many different variations, and this is why physically moving your ass to the place where the teacher is and to be engaged in the process that arises around the teacher in this conscious way, that you you create your role, your part in collaborating with the unfoldment of the current that you're currently able to access. What piece of truth or love, true love, that has come to you. And we do it with each other. The small groups, like in the 6 days and the 9 days, there is an extraordinary thing that happens in those rooms where one person pops into that quality of being in existence in their body in the way they haven't. The whole rest of the room discovers that for themselves in some way, depending upon their capacity. It's like an eruption, and it's an unfolding of something that's already there. But it takes your ass in the room. You have to be in the room. That's it. What is it? I exist. Well, you have to exist somewhere in space and time. So place matters. Physicality matters because that's what you're trying to transmute with your expanded awareness. You're trying to make it real, and real in this dimension is the body. And it may not be comfortable. It may be unpleasant. And I assure you, uncomfortable and unpleasant is a constant, familiar companion for me as well. It can exist simultaneously with enormous expansion and bliss and presence. It's no longer an issue. The body will probably survive. Doesn't seem like it always. But the principle behind it is keep putting your seat, but keep putting your ass into the situation where it happens. Because no matter where you are, you're in your house, you're with your family, you're with your friends, you're with your dogs, you're with your pots and pans and what you had for dinner and what you're going to have later and what your snack and breakfast and you're in that whole paradigm. So whatever comes, it's not going to be able to establish itself because you've got all this other stuff that you're unwittingly continuously empowering. I mean, someone said I'm old school. It's true. I am old school. You have to be single focused if you wish to really manifest the supreme in yourself. You have to make that the most important principle. It was the old Dharma and it is the new Dharma. Some very fundamental principles here is what you attend to, you empower. If you make one thing you attend to, you empower greatly. What you choose to attend to and what you choose not to attend to is an important part of you being able to awaken to the truth of what you already are. So Washoe Valley is a committed opportunity. It's not, there is actually kind of a congenial environment here. I mean, people have a good time. They get together and they do Thanksgiving and they go to the local cafe and they go for hikes and walks. They live in a beautiful area with mountains and open space.
And it snows.
It snows. She loves most. And behind that is this fundamental reorganization of your existence, which you get to share with other people who are going through the same fundamental reorganization of their existence, and which you're not going to fully recognize until you actually complete the journey. So good for you. Good for you. Good for each one of you who has been willing and able to take a stand for the rest of their life for this reason. And then it's just a matter of the willingness to go through the process. Now, everybody has to go at it through their own way. Some can move quickly. Some will have to move slowly. But we have enough guidance and support for people to be able to discover. I try not to put people into a situation where they don't recover from. Obviously, I'm trying to create vessels for the Supreme to manifest, so I want the vessel to be intact.
Well, the ego might now recover.
Yeah, not in the way it did before, but it will come back. It'll come back as the full collaborator with the Supreme Authority within itself, or that it's part of. Any other questions? Anybody else would like to share? Yeah, we got the hammer out tonight, so. All right, Tonya.
I guess while you were speaking, I was just reflecting on that I've been working with you for almost 4 years. And what I was noticing when you were speaking, one thing that I'm seeing and reflecting on that time is that whatever my fears were like you were able to speak to them in a way that brought them up even more, that created, like if you say something like, and then maybe you'll be lost forever and you'll lose the opportunity of the lifetime. When you say things like that, like those are my biggest fears, that I'll be lost forever, that I don't know what I'm doing, that I can't trust myself. Like there's whole quantum of fears that I recognize that I've carried with me. And in relationship with you, they've come up over and over and again. And I've had the opportunity to face them and to find the place where I can see that that's not true for me, to come up to a place where you've been able to give me advice, and I've been so diligent with following it, and for the most part, and then coming to a place where I have to recognize, like, actually, like, I'm the one that has to know about my life, and like not to discount anybody else's advice or their more experience or their perspective, and to take that all into consideration, but then to come from the place of like, wait, like these are my fears and I can't be constricted by those.
Good.
and following instruction based off of fearing the repercussions if I don't or something, and then coming to a place where I'm recognizing, okay, and then that means that everything that I do, I'm in full responsibility for the effects of those things.
Consequences.
Yeah. And so I can just recognize like how, like the ordeal that you're speaking to is so real, and it's so valuable because I can just see the huge shift that I've gone through in this time with you, and that I'm like nowhere close to who I was when I met you 4 years ago, when I started listening to the talks that you were giving in India 4 years ago. And the place that I come from now, when I hear you saying these things, those fears might still like come up because they're habitual, but the response that I have is like, that's not true for me. Like I know who I am. I know what I'm doing here. Like I feel the current, like my life is oriented towards service. Like you're okay. Like you know, like you have these wonderful people in your life. You've got support. Like it's like this, like, okay, like I'm okay. And like, I got this, and it's like, I'm not going to be lost forever. And like, just like all those fundamental fears, like being able to face them and say, that's not true.
So what you're witnessing is someone who, as the human being and as the being, has discovered her authority. And what she thought as the human being about the authority of her being was that it maybe wouldn't be true. And part of this is because Tonya is still unfolding the arc of your life. And that unless the vessel has gone through the developmental stages, then the higher stages can't be held. They can't be manifest until the person has developed sufficiently to hold them. So, and what is that? It's her recognition. I've got more to live. I got more to try out. I got more to trip up and screw up and discover and those ordeals, which I know that when I have come to them, then this higher authority will be more firmly and fully established. So it's I can think of you. I was just thinking the other day about this because I heard you had come back about the time when you were going to school and you were staying in the little house on Mira's property and the process you were in during that time. And I would say, she says, it's like there were times where I can't do this. I can't stay here. I can't do it. And I would just say, sorry, you're in the perfect place. And she did it. It's like, wow, she did it. And that's because her being could recognize what I am. And that recognition is what allowed her to be able to listen to my direction. The fundamental principle of obedience is what obeys is the same principle that we're obeying, the source from which the direction has come from. That can obey. It's not us who does this journey. It's not the ego. It could collaborate. It's the divinity within. The faith within determines what we reach. So when it can recognize that this is the final authority, but you're not ready for it yet this life, then the truth of it is I need to be ready for it this life. And it will always be of service. And then all the bitching and moaning about relationship and Syrian and being free to do it your way, and then all this will come up because it's the unfolding of the human ego. It's the unfolding of the opportunity of yourself discovering what's true and not true, what you can trust and not trust. And when you got all that biochemistry and all that young energy, you ain't going to get through this cleanly. You're going to lose body parts. It's just inevitable. It's just what happens. So it's a process. It's an ordeal, an arc of an ordeal. But Donya, you have organized your life purposely. And what is the principle of the purpose? You said to serve the world. And it will always be more and more perfect. And what you do in between is really not very important.
And it's also interesting to see, like, when that shift really came for me, like I was also working with Mariana in that group, and that served so much with the perspective that brought, and just this different way of relating to it. It just all sort of coincided at the same time, and created this just some sort of container for that unfolding to happen. It was like, you see, like it's always perfect. Like you really don't need to worry about this. And then to also recognize that then when the vital, because it's so strong, and like because I am young and because of all that you're speaking to, and that does come up, it's like, it's a lot, but like, I'm still there. Like I got, and maybe it's veiled for some time, but I can still recognize it. Like now I've been through this enough times that it's like that essence always remains and is always seeing this, and it's untangling it even in the entanglement. And that then on the other side, that's where the space is created for then the next unfolding. So
for you, Tonya, the ball has already started rolling. It's inevitably going to where it's headed. Everything else is just passing. So in that way, a part of her knows this. Many who are with me knows this. The ball is already in motion. It means you just ride with it. You just roll with it. And then in that process, everything you need will keep coming to you proportional to what it is that's needed. And that's the unfolding of the opportunity. It's not really a surrender. It's just a letting go of putting in your heels or grabbing onto the grasses or the trees that come by. It's just this process of continuously letting go so the ball can continue to roll down the mountain. Because it's the fundamental truth. It's the bottom line. You are nothing else but the Supreme Being. You couldn't possibly be anything else. It's just the ego that comes, the story, the memory that creates this whole mirage about what we are, who we are, essentially. So, yeah, it's always. I'm so happy always when I talk to you. It just gives me joy, like a father with a daughter. She's found her trick. Makes me happy. Mhm.
And it's really lovely to see Satchimai up here. I just see you in a different way than
Yeah.
because I haven't seen you in a couple of months.
No.
And I was just like looking at you this whole time, just like,
Look at her.
wow. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else like to come forward? Good, Scott.
You were talking about the history of what you've created here. And I can think of no better example of the fruition of what you've created here than what happened today at 10:30 in the Ethan barn. And I think looking at people who were there, I think I can speak for them as well. We started reading your book. And I don't think we got through a page and a half and everybody in the room was just enlivened.
Yeah, I told you that book kicks butt. That means your butt's in the room if it kicks, right?
It does.
Yeah.
It was truly alive. That was the feeling for me.
That's wonderful.
And the energy in the group, it was coming down into the group and going back up. And everybody was experiencing it in different ways. But it was alive for everyone. It was very powerful.
Yeah. See, now don't you want to come to Washoe Valley?
Yeah.
Come, now, not that that's going to leave you unscathed starting tomorrow or tonight, because when a big opening happens, the whole system has to go through a new realignment.
Yeah, what goes up must come down.
Yeah. So, but, Scott, thank you for that. That's very wonderful. And it is something that I'm seeing happening in the small groups. But there is no richer place than here.
I agree because, I spent all that time in Europe with you.
Yeah.
And I flew back and I went to my house, which I haven't spent a lot of time at since my wife's passing. And it didn't feel like home. It really didn't. I have a little, since I've rented it, I have a little space down below and I've purposely kept it quite rustic. There's a cot with a pad. It's not.
You're a yogi at heart.
Yeah, well, I am. Yeah, but comfortable sleeping arrangement. It's short and narrow, and I'm narrow, but I'm not short. But
well, it works at half 50% good.
Yeah, so I think I spent 4 nights there before I came up here. And I remember driving up here and getting past Reno and then coming over here. And there was a feeling, a washing over me that I had come home. It was very powerful.
Yeah.
Very powerful.
Yeah.
And likewise, I went and did that little trip to see some family and came back again. It was definitely there as well.
Congratulations.
Yes.
It's where you are.
Much like I spoke to you in a small group when we were in North Carolina, how that was so reminiscent. It was originally built by the TM organization.
Oh, that's right. The place. Yeah.
And even though that wasn't the place I spent 3 years, the one I was in was Iowa. It was definitely a homecoming there. And it felt very familiar and comfortable, but it didn't feel like home. So
there's a new standard for what home is, right? A new measure of what home is now.
And that's the force.
Yeah. And it's always with you. And that's what's growing. The place is secondary. But often it takes a place because bodies are in places.
Yes.
So therefore it takes a place for us to find that place within ourselves. Because we're simple beings at the level of the body. We're very habitual, very physical. Therefore, where we put our asses, where we sit, is actually going to determine what's possible for us if we put ourselves in a place where the highest possibility is trying to manifest. You're going to be doing much better than if you're putting yourself into a familiar, comfortable place that you already know. And when you're in the familiar, comfortable place you already know, you're not going to think anything is missing. And when you're in the place that you don't know, and that is the new possibility, you wouldn't want to be any place other than there until you get back home and you forget. And then you're just where you want to be. Mm-hmm. The nature of consciousness is so tricky that unless the rock is already starting to roll, you will move it a few feet and then it will stop. Move it a few more feet and then it will stop. But if the rock is actually roll, there will be no home but that place which serves the highest possibility you are that's available to you. Because there are ashrams all over the place. There's places all over the place, any of which might be just perfectly aligned with the vibrational field of your body. But this is the place you have found, and this is where you are. And this place talks back. I'm the mouth. It doesn't shut up. It's constantly reminding you that we're creating a place greater than what we already are together. And that we all have a possibility of bringing that up, making it our place. This place, our place. As a matter of fact, whatever place you are should be your place. Mm-hmm. You own it fully, but we don't live that way. We don't live it other than we own it through the things that we've known as persons, as human beings. We decorate it or we built it, like in your case. You built it from scratch. Mm-hmm. Well, now you're building a new place for yourself. And though it may seem like Washoe right now, but it is of a different order of this dimension.
Yes, I get it.
Yep. It's the action. He's followed me everywhere since we left. Every single program, every single song, almost everywhere. Everywhere.
Except UK.
Except UK.
You and Kathy Ivins.
Yeah. Yeah, and we're already making plans.
Oh, no.
So there is this, single focused, and obviously the rock was rolling downhill for him, but he had one last thing keeping it in place. Mm-hmm. And then it was moved. Mm-hmm. And now the rock is gathering momentum. And where we'll end up, he will know who he is. He will know what he is. He'll be what I am. And so should all of you be. So may all of you be. If you can learn to endure calmly. I can't stop cracking a joke. My teacher
That's
used
his
to
idea of cracking a joke.
Yeah, my teacher used to say these very profound things, and I was the guy who came out with the wisecrack. I said, "What are you doing?" Humor helps. It also helps integrate what just came out. So, all right, Scott. Thank you. Welcome. Okay, so how are we doing? Our timekeeper,
Well, it's up to you. Take another person or do meditation.
Is there any one person who wants to pop up?
Now or wait?
Anne.
She did it.
Oh, look at that.
I like that.
There's two parts of her that are in battle right now. Were you at that Ethan Byrne event?
Yes, and I have to iterate. I can hardly speak what it was.
Well, good.
For me.
Got it.
And I have realized sitting there that the log jam occurs when what I want to say is too complicated. So I'm trying to simplify. Okay. The first thing I want to say is that one of the most powerful things about being here and that you have provided, whether I'm here or not, is context. And, life has ordeals wherever you are. And I had plenty of ordeals before I got here, but I would rather be doing my ordeals here than anywhere. This is where I want to do my ordeals now. In the context and with the consciousness and the awareness that I have now. And I have to keep saying, the honeymoon hasn't ended for me. for that reason. It'll be 2 years for me in late March. So, I mean, I'm on a honeymoon here.
All right. Well, there are such things as happy long-term relationships.
With Ordeal. I'm in a happy long-term
what is a
relationship
happy
with
long-term
Ordeal.
relationship is one you keep creating. It's the one you keep choosing. That's the secret of happiness in the long-term relationship, wherever you are, is you keep choosing what it is that's arising that you wouldn't want to be with, right? Until there's nothing you wouldn't want to be with. And then you're in relationship with everything. And that's the final marriage.
And it hasn't hurt to step away like you do and come back. So,
Well, and yes, I do that a lot. And last spring when I did that, I took so much of what I learned with me. There was so much opportunity last spring to do this there.
Good.
But the other thing I wanted to say, I mean, what I've just said, I wasn't planning to say. What I want to say is about North Carolina, and I'll just make this quick. It was my third 9-day, and it was the most powerful by far. I mean, it was just, rocket ship. But one of the things that happened that speaks to this cauldron here is you spoke of the landfill on Tuesday.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
So my landfill kind of disaggregated into some new, fresh, steaming shit piles.
Ah.
And I was so happy about that.
Yeah, it shows its true nature.
Yeah. I mean, like, wow, okay, so this is really discreet and it's fresh. And, nothing was new.
Yeah.
It wasn't like I had never.
But it was more alive. It was more real.
It's steaming now,
Yeah.
Like it's
right.
fresh.
You
and
can see
steaming.
the worms and the organic things moving through it. It's just, you can see the thought threads and the emotional patterns and those little things that get activated in your body. It's just like, yeah, it's like being viscerated with your eyes open. I'm getting there.
Yeah. But I mean, that is the idea.
Yeah, I got it.
That is the idea. And I don't know what to do with my new fresh steaming shit piles.
Well,
yes.
There's nothing
except keep going.
Yes. You have to do is, after you've been with it for a while, it's your living room carpet. It's just it just becomes part of the background of what it is to have been a human being. That's including the Supreme Being delights in every piece of us, human being. It wants to know the shit and the shinola. It likes to have it all. So after a while, it just becomes the territory. And it's us that has the trouble. It's the human, the programming and the conditioning and what we had it mean and what we gave significance to and what we didn't want to be with that makes it seem this way. So it's a transmutation. This is the alchemy. You've taken.
I'm hoping for some alchemy.
Yeah, that's the alchemy, and this is this is where we're headed. We're headed into a deepening into the authenticity that arises when we actually find out what in us is still full of shit. It's not enough to see it, witness it. It's to be the shit and the Supreme Being. And that relationship between that part of us that's identified with the shit and that part of us that is the Supreme Being is what converts the shit into biofuel. It converts it into something other than what it was. And that inherent potentiality that's locked up into that mess gets released, starts burning, consumed.
Yay.
Yay.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming up once again. Throwing yourself into the fire. Okay. All right, so we're going to finish with a silent sitting for the evening. This will be it until Tuesday. But Tuesday will be a silent sitting. Those of you who haven't had a silent sitting remotely, we used to do it without the camera, so I could go off and hang out until it was over. But no, I'm
Don't
lying.
reveal all the
I
secrets.
never did that. But now I have a camera. I have to stay in the room. I do turn the light. I could have put a mannequin up. I didn't. Okay, so we're going to just simple, silent, still. Be aware of your breath. It's good to breathe because that's the life force, and the life force can align with the current. The current and the life force are similar. And then be aware of the energy that's occurring in your body. Be aware of any blockage or pressure or areas that pulls your attention. And just notice that. Just hold the space for it. While you breathe in, being still and silent. Breathe in the silence. Breathe out the noise. Breathe in the silence. Breathe out the noise. Empty yourself of all the noise, so all that's left is silence. Hari Om Tat Sat. Hari Om Tat Sat. Hari Om Tat Sat Shri. All glory to Buddha. Namaste and good night.